Welcome to the Groundwater Foundation's Hydrogeology Challenge video walkthrough. This walkthrough will give you a brief introduction to the Hydrogeology Challenge and how it works. For more information on the Hydrogeology Challenge and further resources, please check out the reference and about sections listed on the top right portion of the screen. To begin the Hydrogeology Challenge, you must first go to groundwater.behere.net. This will bring you to the Getting Started screen. From here, you may click on the Start the Challenge button. This brings up the scenario or challenge page. You may either proceed with the scenario that first appears, or you may go up to the top left of your screen and click on the blue arrow button to select a new scenario from the drop-down list. I'll use California 1 for this walkthrough. Each scenario has a map with wells placed on it. The wells are blue and labeled with letters. If I scroll over a well, a blue box with well information pops up. This tells me the ground elevation, G, the water table elevation and static conditions, S, and the water table elevation and pumping conditions, P. I may select the well by clicking on it. If I wish to unselect the well, I can simply scroll over to where it says Choose 3 wells and unclick that well. To determine groundwater flow, you must calculate 3 things: flow direction, gradient, and horizontal velocity. In order to calculate those 3 things, data from 3 wells are needed. For this walkthrough, I'm going to use wells G, A, and C. At this point, I can choose whether or not I wish to have my wells pumping water. To turn pumping on, simply click the white box next to pumping on. For this walkthrough, I will stick to static conditions and leave all the pumping off. Now, you may have noticed that my blue data box for well G is hidden. To fix this, I can simply click on the blue box and drag it wherever I wish on my screen. Now we're ready to begin calculating our flow direction. If you are new to the Hydrogeology Challenge, you might want to take a look at the reality check. You can access the reality check by clicking on the blue box with the check mark. The reality check contains information about the corresponding portion of the model. This one is for flow direction. It will explain the assumptions the Hydrogeology Challenge makes versus what would happen in reality. You can turn it off by clicking the blue box again. To calculate flow direction, follow the directions as listed in the challenge. In this case, we're going to begin with step 1. So it begins by asking, what is the well with the highest water table elevation? So we would look at our 3 wells, and we know that we're in static conditions, so we're looking at the water table elevation in S, static conditions. So in this particular situation, well G has the highest water table elevation, and then you would enter in its elevation. So now, for the sake of brevity, I'm going to continue filling in all of this information. I'm going to fill in this last box incorrectly so I can show you this next feature, which is our check answer or show solution feature. If you click on the check answer, it'll mark all of your answers that are correct in green and your incorrect answers in red. So now I know that this last box is incorrect. If I want to know what the answer is, I can click on Show Solution and it'll show me that the correct answer should actually be 13 and not 10. So now that I have that filled out, I'm ready to move on to step 2, and I'll just continue filling in the information as it asks. Now it is important to note that for some boxes, it tells you how many decimals you need to round to. You do need to pay attention to those in order for it to be able to properly tell you whether or not your answer is correct. So after step 2, you might have noticed that this gray line appeared. This gray line is actually a water table contour line. This represents a line of equal water table elevation. So now we're ready to move on to step 3. In step 3, we're actually going to choose our groundwater flow direction. Now, groundwater flow always wants to move from areas of higher water table elevation to areas of lower water table elevation. So in our situation, you would think it'd move from well G across the water table contour line perpendicularly. So we want to move the arrow until it's perpendicular to the grade line. So I think that looks about perpendicular. And now we can see the answer was 165 degrees plus or minus 10 degrees. It gives you a little bit of room for variance. So now we're done calculating our flow direction. We can move on to gradient. For gradient, the first thing you're going to do is reveal distance y. Distance y is the flow distance perpendicular to the water table contour, and it's represented by this red dashed line on the map. Now the model calculates distance y for you, so all you have to do is type in the value, which is 4,848 feet. And then we can move on to the second step in calculating our gradient. And we find that our gradient is 0.0027. And again, you can continue to check your answers to make sure that everything is showing up correctly as you move through the model. So now we can move on to our final step, which is horizontal velocity. For horizontal velocity, we've already found our gradient to be 0.0027. But now we need to figure out what our conductivity and our porosity values are. To do this, we would scroll over to the box that corresponds to our well with our highest water table elevation, in this case, well G. You can open up all of your geology data by clicking the top right corner. This shows you the different layers of soil types below the surface. So the depth, their lithology or soil type, their hydraulic conductivity, which is K, as well as their porosity. Now, the hydrogeology challenge assumes that groundwater is mainly flowing through the saturated layer with the highest conductivity. So to figure out where our saturated layer is, we would look at our ground elevation, which is 1,515 feet, and our water table elevation, which is 1,448 feet, and take the difference. And we'll find that our saturation zone begins at 67 feet below the surface. So silty sand, sandstone, and gravel all fall within the saturated zone. So looking at these three layers, we would pick the layer with the highest conductivity and assume that's where our groundwater is going to flow through. In this case, it's gravel with a conductivity of 241.2, and our porosity is 32% or 0.32. And again, you can check your answer to make sure that what you've typed in is correct. And now that we've found those values, we can use them to calculate Darcy's law. And we will find that our horizontal velocity ends up being 2.04 feet per day. And with that, we've completed the hydrogeology challenge, and we can click on the All Done button. This will give us two options. We can either continue with the previous selection or begin a new scenario. If you continue with previous selection, it'll just bring you back to your screen, and you can continue working on what you were already working on. However, if you click Begin a New Scenario, it'll refresh the screen and it'll allow you to choose a new scenario or choose new wells within the same scenario you were just working on. Thank you for your interest in the Hydrogeology Challenge. We hope you have fun learning about groundwater modeling. For more information on the Hydrogeology Challenge or the Groundwater Foundation, please visit the Foundation's website at www.groundwater.org.